everyone. My name is Laurie Smith, and I am a child abuse prevention public speaker. I'm a survivor of abuse, child abuse, and I'm doing a whole month's worth of shows, and just to be another voice out here for April National Child Abuse Prevention and Awareness Month down in the states. And I usually broadcast in April, but not usually 30 days in a row. So uh, this is day three, so we're just getting at it. I'm just picking topics, and here's my cat. You can't see her, but she's right here. I'm just picking topics, just randomly. I'm just listing off 30 days worth of topics to talk about. So that's what I'm doing. And child abuse is such a horrible thing, and nobody really wants to think about it. Nobody wants to hear about it. Nobody wants to talk about it. Um, this children who survive, they just want to live a normal life. Um, most survivors don't like talking about it, and it's just something that people just don't want to talk about. It's such a scourge uh, in our human societies since time began. People have been abusing children, for eons and eons, of course, and it's still happening. It's kind of like, why? I can't figure that one out. I'm kind of like, you'd think we'd have progressed, to a certain point where, we could say, oh, finally we've got it. No more child abuse, but we don't. And people are more and more, you know, abusing children. They find new ways. It's kind of like, you know, they think of new things, right? It's just absolutely, actually, it's just mind boggling. I'm just like, I don't know what's the matter with people, why you would want to hurt a child. And, but so many people do, and they love it. And it's just a real shame, shame on our society. Shame on those people that do those things to children and, think that it's okay. And then, these children, if they survive the abuse, then have to try to figure out how they're going to live in this world that's not prepared to even help them or to even relate with them one on one because they can't, you know. That's why I titled my book "One Child Abuse Survivor to Another," and my all my audio work that I did for years there on Blog Talk Radio, mainly from 2010 to 2013, 2014, right in there somewhere. But it's just because so many survivors don't have anybody to talk to. Nobody's talking about this stuff. There's more and more, thankfully. But I'm just saying, just in society in general, thankfully there are people talking about this, and there are people making, changes to the laws to protect children, and they're making changes, in the human rights arena for child rights, and this is wonderful. Praise God, that makes me happy, right? As a survivor of abuse, right? I didn't get to have children. I was made barren by CSA, child sexual abuse, and so I lost my baby just right at midterm with my husband and I. We lost our baby, and I was told I would never be able to get pregnant. So for me to get pregnant was a big deal, and because I wanted children, and I think I would have been a good mother. And I wouldn't have been perfect. There is no perfect parent, right? But I think I would have been just a mother full of love for her children, right? And so after losing that baby, I was never able to get pregnant again. So, that was stolen from me. And I just don't understand how people could do these things to children, even though I understand the factors and surrounding the issues of child abuse because I grew up abused, so I know what was going on in my home, um, and what caused the main issues. But the thing is that it's still it's still mind blowing that people do these horrible, cruel acts to children. Bad enough to another adult, but adults have a voice, and adults can leave the situation usually. Some domestic violence cases, I mean, that's not the case, but for the most part, adults can get themselves some help, right? Whereas children really cannot. So unless somebody's watching out for them, doing the right thing, that child's just going to suffer, or those children. So, it's so important that we all get involved and do whatever we can. And, if it just means looking out for the children in your own world, making sure that you understand the signs and symptoms of all the different types of abuse, and that you know what to look for. You also know what to watch for with the people who are around your children, and that you would be aware that there are people out there who are stalking, and wanting to get a hold of children, and you don't want them getting a hold of your children. So even if you're not abusing your children, which would be just a wonderful thing, it's so important that you realize that other people in your life may want to abuse your children. You just don't know. So you have to be really careful and, basically screen uh, everyone that comes around your child, right, to make sure that, your child is safe, right? Because this world is a sick place. And there's all kinds of really sick, disgusting stuff going on. And people, adults doing that with adults, I mean, that's their own deal. But people perpetrating, abuse on a child is incredibly wrong. So I don't mind speaking out against it. Like, hey, I got only so many years left in my life. You know, what could be more important than being a voice for these children out here, who are being abused and will get no help tonight. They'll die. Right? They'll be killed, murdered, or die from the abuse. And so many others will just be continue to be abused, and nobody will get them any help. And I don't mind being a voice for them. They can't speak out for themselves, and so that's why I do what I do. And it's just so important. Like I said, just get involved in whatever way you can. Right? We're looking tonight at missing children, and I found a great website. I did post it on the on the show page there. It's called Missing. It's www.missingkids.org, and this is the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And this is a great website. Tons and tons of information on here about missing kids, every issue you could think of, and more. And there's all sorts of information on what to look for, how to spot. It's really important for people to get this information because you never know. There could be a missing child in your area, and if you don't know the signs and symptoms, you know, you wouldn't even know what to look for. So we all need to be educated in this stuff, right? So I want to cover this tonight because missing children, a lot of times people think that, all these missing youth and children out here are just children who ran away from home because they didn't like the rules. I've heard that so many times. I'm just like, I'm tired of hearing it actually from other adults who sit there and, you know, well, they just didn't want to deal with the rules at home. Because some of that is the case. Some children do run away because they don't like the rules that the parents you know, have set, as the set family rules, and this is what we're going to do, and then these children are, and youth are like, I want to go do my thing, and I don't want to live by these rules, so they take off thinking that they're going to be fine and safe on the street, and a lot of times they find them, they bring them back home, and they're miserable because they have to go deal with the rules. Now there is that, right? That is some of it, but it's not all of it. There's a lot of missing children out there who have been kidnapped. They've been taken into child sex rings. Trafficked. Um, you know, they get into gangs and stuff like that, which then it just leaves them very vulnerable for trafficking. And you know, it's just a horrible situation. There's so many missing children out there, and from toddlers and infants to you know, right up into 17-year-olds, right? There's lots of youth who are missing, and this website is amazing. There is so much good stuff on this website. I hope you'll go check it out. Missingkids.org. So we're going to look there. I'll just read briefly what the issues are. They've listed a bunch of issues, but they have a whole bunch more that we're not even going to look at. There's just so many. But there's child sex trafficking, family abductions, infant abduction, long-term missing, missing from care, non-family abductions and attempts, online enticement, and endangered runaways, and sextortion, and sexual abuse, like for instance, sexual abuse materials like child pornography and stuff like that. So there's a huge, you know, issue with missing children. Where are they? They're somewhere, right? And we'll start with the first one here. I just want to look at. Uh, we'll just kind of briefly look at them. Child sex trafficking. And let's go as far as we can. We've only got an hour, so there's only so much we'll be able to look at. I'm not going to read everything on these websites. It's going to kind of bring a few things to, sort of talk about a few of these things just to sort of bring awareness about it. A lot of people, like I said, think that children are just, these missing kids are just all runaways and they just didn't like the rules at home. That's just not the case. A lot of times children run from abuse. I thought about it many times. And I thought about I knew kids who had some issues and troubles on the streets, and I knew there was danger on the streets. It wasn't just all, oh, only my family is abusers. I didn't trust anybody. I didn't trust my family, and I also didn't trust strangers, because I knew that strangers are capable of hurting children too. So I was like, I just didn't trust anybody, and so running away wasn't necessarily a good option for me. I was thinking about it, throughout my youth, especially even a couple of times when I was really little, I was thinking about where would I go if I ran away. I was thinking I'd go to the park that I used to play at, and it, it scared me because I'd be thinking about going there after my mom beat me up, and I thought, well, what if I like pass out and die there or something, and then I just die in this sort of tube thing at the park, and nobody would find me. That was always this thought in my head. No child should have to be living like that, but so many do, right? That's why I'm a voice for children, um, for these abused children out here, because I know what this is all about. So, I mean, I thought about running away many times. I actually used to stay away for a few days, like sometimes or even a few weeks. Not on the streets. Thankfully, I had people's parents who were really decent and let me stay at their house, and because I knew their daughter, and so I was friends with their daughter, and these parents were really cool, and they let me stay there, and they actually wanted to intervene for me. But I told them I'd run away. I said, if I go to foster care, I'm running away. I'm not going to foster care. So it was a big issue. I was determined to stay in my home because I wanted my mom to take responsibility for me and actually love me. That was the whole issue. It's kind of like, no, you're, you know, in my mind, I was like, I wanted my mom to do the right thing by me. Especially, I didn't care so much, like I said, about my dad. I've never really, it's like whatever. But I wanted a relationship with my mom. It was important to me, and it just didn't happen. It never was going to happen, and it never did. So there you go. That's what abuse is all about. So, child sex trafficking, it says it's a form of child abuse that occurs when a child under 18 is advertised, solicited, or exploited through a commercial sex act. A commercial sex act is any sex act where something of value, such as money, drugs, or a place to stay, is given to or received by any person for sexual activity. Um, and a lot of times, I mean, these children are trafficked in sex rings. So, they're basically just kidnapped or coerced somehow, and then kidnapped and then just moved around. You know, they're they're held against their will, and many of them just end up dead. You know, um, it's a horrible situation, absolutely horrible. And so many children who do run away from abusive homes where they're, maybe they're not being abused, but maybe there's a lot of violence in the home, or maybe there's criminal activity in the home, or whatever the issues are, and these children run away, or youth, and they think it's safer on the street, and that's the mistake that they make, because then these people will befriend them, these young kind of pimps or whatever, you know, they act like they're their friend. They know all about it. Oh, I know, that's all right. You can hang with us, gang type situations, and they gain this youth or this child's trust, and then they offer them a place to stay. It's like, well, you don't have to worry about going back to that. We'll look after you. We're a family. We're like we're a gang, but we're all family. Like, we'll look after you, and that's how they pull them in. And these kids have no idea what they're getting into at all, right? They're promised a place to stay and safety, and they end up just being abused. Uh, so they left an abusive situation to possibly a worse abusive situation. Be, running from abuse to be abused. And that's why I didn't run away because I was like, I knew what was on the street. I'm like, well, At least I know what I'm getting at home. I can kind of just deal with this. You know what I mean? It's not okay, folks. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just not okay what's going on. Um, I knew so many kids who came from really bad homes, and some of them were worse than mine. Some of these homes, you know, and it was just like, you know, I really never had a lot of respect for adults. Let's just put it that way. And actually, even today, I really kind of still don't. You know, I'm an adult. I'm an old adult now, but I still don't respect adults all that much because they're the ones responsible for these children, and they're the ones that make these horrible, horrible decisions that screw up these children and mess these children's, psyches up, you know, to the point where there's no return for these kids, you know. And a lot of these people on the streets that you see that are older, older adults that are homeless and drug addiction, and or they're in prison, um, a lot of them will tell you that they were abused as children, right? And this is just not okay because somebody made a choice. It's a choice. People don't have to abuse a child. There's no there's no reason why a person should choose to abuse a child, but they do. And so, it's just really, really sad. So children run from abuse just to end up being, picked up by some sort of a pimp or child sex trafficker, and then they're abused some more, and then they're killed. A lot of them are killed, and or they end up just drug addicted, and they grow older, and then continue on the lifestyle as a sex worker, and that's no life, right? Um, it's terrible. It's absolutely terrible what's going on. And so that's why, I mean, a lot of times these missing children, it's not because they didn't like the rules at home. It's because they were being abused and they ran, right? Ran away to try to get away from the abuse, and then end up missing, right? And some of them are afraid to be found because they don't want to be taken back to their abusive home, right? Or whatever was going on. People say, well, they just don't want to live by the rules. But you don't know all the circumstances around that stuff. Could have been sexual abuse going on. There could have been psychological abuse going on, even if it wasn't physical abuse. Psychological abuse, emotional abuse is really hard to prove in court. It's hard to prove that a parent is abusing their child emotionally or psychologically. You can tell when it's physical abuse, as long as there's some sort of proof, physical proof. It's kind of like the proof is there. But when it's like emotional abuse, psychological abuse, and spiritual abuse, this kind of thing, it's hard to prove. Children, it's don't abuse is abuse, and it's all damaging, and it's all, if you ask me, it's all deadly, right? Because uh, it's damaging to a person's psyche, how they think, how they feel. Many children who are abused end up committing suicide. Many adult survivors of child abuse end up killing themselves. It's just a horrific situation, right? And the only answer is that people just need to stop abusing children. Every single person on the planet needs to just stop. Stop abusing children. I think it's a great thing. So as far as child trafficking, child sex trafficking, they're talking about here pimp controlled trafficking, gang controlled trafficking. There's all types. Familial trafficking. That's when a child is trafficked with by a relative or in their own home, right? And that's hard to spot. It's much harder to spot that than it is, these other types, right? Buyer perpetrated trafficking. I mean, this is horrific, and it's going on. So, and they have numbers here where you can call if believe that um, you might have run into a child who's being trafficked. You could get that child some help. It's 1-800 the lost, and you could you know give them some tips on um, where this child is and who this child is, and try to get them some help. Right? It's really important. So next we will look at The next one, family abductions. And they said this is where a child is taken wrongfully detained or concealed by a parent or other family member. And that does happen. We had a case of that here in Alberta not all that long ago. It was last year or the year before. And they were looking for this family, a mother and a the mother's mother. So it was the grandma, the mother had taken their children, her children, um, away from an area that they weren't supposed to leave because it was a custody issue, and they were just missing, right? And eventually they were found, but it took them a long time to find them. It's not okay to do stuff like that. It puts the children under a lot of trauma. The issue is a lot of times people are trying to get their children out of an abusive home. For instance, let's say it's the mother who's abusive, um, but she gets to keep the children, right? And the courts give her the children. And then the husband knows that the mother is abusing the child or the children, but there's nothing they can do about it because the courts don't believe it, even though they've got pictures or whatever. I know all about this stuff. I see this stuff all over the place. But the work that I do, I've run into so many people who have been in this situation. And, the courts won't do anything about it. Their child's being abused. And so they just go and they take their child back away from the abuser. And quite often, I mean, it ends, the children are the one that pay the price, right? They're already being abused. There's a whole lot of trauma going on. They're living with one parent who's abusing them, and then another one takes them, and then you got police chasing them and people trying to get a hold of them. Talk about trauma for the child, right? Bad decisions are being made on behalf of children in the courts too. So, I mean, they were in our case too. We should have been removed from the home. We should have been removed from our home when my parents were brought up on child abuse charges, but they just left us in the home. Right? Bad idea. And it's kind of like, oh, well, mistakes are made, but the children pay the price, right? And this is why it's just things we get. This just has to change, right? It really does. Um, so what can you do? This is an issue. They said, risk factors found that certain conditions may increase the risk that a family member may abduct a child. However, the absence of any of these following does not mean that an abduction will not occur. That is, if a family member who has previously abducted or threatened to abduct a child has a history of marital instability, lack of cooperation with the other parent, domestic violence or child abuse, has a criminal record, has stronger ties to a different state, province, or country than those where they currently reside, have no job, can work anywhere, or is financially independent, and is engaged in planning activities such as quitting a job, selling a home, closing accounts, hiding or destroying documents, purchasing travel tickets. These are signs that kind of could sort of warn somebody that their child is at risk for a family abduction. Right. So these do happen. It does happen all the time. That's part of the missing kids. And then there is infant abduction, which is just the same thing, right? Long-term missing. There is not there's missing from care, and this is just the issue. Children who are in some type of care situation, and whether it's foster care or whatever. Um, if they're being abused there, then quite often they'll run away, and then they're missing. Sometimes these children are just murdered right out. I mean, they're just murdered, and then the people call it in as a missing child. Right? That has happened many times. Say, oh, I don't know, I've been missing for such and such amount of time, and they do investigate these things. It takes them, sometimes years before they find out the truth, right, about these children being killed that were reported missing. And it's terrible. It's absolutely terrible. But there's no guarantee that foster care or any other institution isn't abusing a child, right? And they are capable because child abusers are anywhere where the child is. Right? So for every abused child, there's an abuser, right? So who are these people? It's anybody who has access to the child. So, there is no perfect situation, obviously, right? And it's a shame, but that's just the way it is. And because our world is very sick, obviously, and twisted. So, children, they're already, in a situation where their lives are, you know, things just aren't going well. They're in foster care for whatever reason, you know what I mean? Or some type of care, you know, care situation. And then, they end up leaving that missing and then exploited, right? So, whether it's sex trafficking or whatever, or they end up they're just killed, right? Uh, Terrible situation. And um, there's a whole section here on what you can do to report a child missing from care. Download quick reference guide to reporting. So there's all kinds of good information on this website. This is a great website. This is just gives people an idea of what the issues are with missing children. And I'm not even gonna, we won't even get into them all. Just don't have time. But you can check this out yourself, and it's really worth looking at. Non-family abductions and attempts. I mean, I was almost kidnapped a few times, and that's the thing. Um, as a young little girl, like I wasn't even like 4 years old, maybe. Um, and I was playing, and this older man just walked off with me, and a neighbor saw it, thankfully, and yelled at that guy, and he was like, "Well, I'm not doing anything." She's like, "You get off the block." But see, back in those days, you didn't bother calling the police for stuff like that. You know, it was just great that she happened to be there. Otherwise, I mean, who knows what would have happened, right? You don't just come along and walk off with somebody's child, but people do. You know, and that's the missing children, kidnapped. This is terrible, but it happens all the time. And you have to watch your children, man. If you have children, I see people do it all the time, and I mean, I won't say where, and I won't name names because I don't know these people, just strangers. But I see people doing it all the time where I work, and people just let their kids just meander off. Little tiny kids, 4, 5, 6 years old, you know, um, and they just unattended for a period of time. And I sit there and I count the seconds of how quick it would be for somebody to grab that child and split. And those people wouldn't even know for like a minute later. They'd be like frantically searching for their child, and their child's gone. Just, you cannot do that. You can't just not be paying attention to where your children are. You really need to know where they are at all times. And especially little children like that, you know. Um, and it's really horrible. I see the headlines about what's going on out in the world, and I don't pass them over and pass them by. And it's just crazy what people do, kidnapping little children. Sometimes they abduct them in stores and then sexually assault them right in the store. This has happened. They've actually caught it on camera and busted somebody doing that to a baby, right? It's because somebody wasn't watching. They just off looking at the carrots and the potatoes or whatever, you know what I mean? And the child's sitting in the basket. And this person got a hold of this child, took the child 2 or 3 aisles over, and sexually assaulted this baby. And while the parents are just searching for more potatoes and thinking about what they're having for supper, you cannot leave your child unattended. It's obvious. I wish people would wake up and smell the coffee now. So it's like I got off work just a little while ago, so you can tell I'm a little bit tired. So, hi Donna, hi Boo, how are you doing? Oh, I'm so glad you're here. Yeah, the children are the ones that suffer. That's right, and it does happen more than we know. Patrick, yeah, that's Patrick Dante, right? Um, you know, it's just crazy what happens out there. There are monsters, seriously, that don't look like monsters. They're just regular people walking down the street and walking through the store and walking wherever and walking through your neighborhood, and they look perfectly fine, but they are sick predators, and they're just waiting to get a hold of your children. So thank you, Donna. I appreciate that. Well, it's just so important that people realize like this is not a game, this is not funny, And children are disappearing, children are dying, children are being abused, and all because people just, yeah, well, we're too busy having a coffee, let the kids play over there, little tiny tiny little babies. You don't know who's around there, who could just walk off with your child real quick. And I'm just like, people, you know I feel like yelling at them. I'd probably lose my job. But the thing is like, seriously, it's crazy, but it's happening. So I'm just putting it out there, um, but they said risk factors for children who are kidnapped, non-family abductions and kidnap attempts and stuff like that. It's really when children who are very vulnerable, and especially young children. Like they said, school age children are at greatest risk on school days, before and after school, 7 to 9 a.m. and 3 to 4 p.m., and after dinner, 6 to 7. Attempted abductions most often occur in the street while children are playing, walking, or riding bikes. That's right. It does happen, folks. You could think your child's safe playing out in the front yard with their other little friends or playing in the backyard. No. Your child is not safe if you're not watching them. They're just not safe. Younger children are more likely to be playing or walking with a parent or an adult, whereas school age children are more likely to be walking alone or with peers. Right? So, this is why it's very important. Sometimes, like for me, I mean, my mom just didn't think anything that would be wrong for me to play in the front yard at the age of 4, and this was back what 1969, um, in this neighborhood, right? And here comes this stranger, this guy walking along, and he's like, "Oh, let's go for a walk." And I was like 4, I was like, "Sure," He seemed friendly, a whole lot more friendly than my parents. I was like, you know, I'll go for a walk. I'm not thinking anything about this, you know what I mean? And thankfully that neighbor stopped him, you know. But little kids, they don't know, you know, they don't have a clue. Sometimes I see lots of children where I work, um, and their parents, and sometimes there are children that are with another adult that kind of look out of place. But then you got to look for body language with the child. Is the child nervous, upset? Does the child seem to not know this person really? Um, or is the child very familiar with this person? So that's how you know. That's a good sign, is whether or not a child is, you know, um, acting almost like that, to kind of show that that person's a stranger in that child's life. If a child is acting like they're very familiar with this person, you know it's probably an uncle or something like that, or an aunt or whatever, right? But I mean, it's just so hard, to know that there's so many children out there who, they'll be found dead if they're found at all. I mean, there's so many children that just, you know, where they are, where their bodies are from like 1940, 1950. I mean, when they started cataloging all of this, um, 1960s, there's so many missing children that, I mean, what happened to them? Their bodies haven't been found. Sometimes there's plenty of, bodies found, but then they have to try to figure out who this body belonged to, like bones and stuff. This is absolutely incredibly wrong, but that tells you just how many child sexual predators there are out there. And I mean, there's a lot. There's, I mean, who knows how many, but there's thousands and thousands and thousands and tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, just in, North America alone. That's not even worldwide. So it's kind of like, your children are not safe. So if you have children, you've got to keep them safe. And, you know, who's going to protect them if you don't, right? So you don't want to end up having an issue with your child going missing. Um, they said that 600 plus attempted abductions were documented by the NCMEC in 2020. 600 plus. In 2020, I mean, that was with COVID going on, and children were not out as much, right? They said in the analysis of attempted abductions, the most common lures used in attempts were offering a child a ride, offering a child candy or sweets, asking the child questions, offering the child money, and using an animal to interest the child, for instance, dog or a cat, you know, because, children love animals. And so if somebody has a cat or a dog and they're like, hey, do you want to see my cat or my dog? And that brings the child over right away because they want to see this animal and they love pets. And it's like, there's all sorts of things that they will do to get that child to get closer to them, right? So they can snatch them, right? So this is terrible. It's just, absolutely horrible. And you know, Donna Shear is here with me tonight, and Donna is my one of my besties. My bestie. That's what we call each other. We've been volunteering for years to work to stop and prevent child abuse. And Donna Shear is really the one that got me involved in this. Um, and she's just an amazing, amazing advocate who's doing some wonderful work, and always and has been for so many years. And it's just like, um, you know, we've been talking about this for a long time, a very, very long time. And yeah, it's so important. It's like you said, I just told my grandchildren about people asking them to see or help find their lost dog or their lost cat, etc. Yeah, it's so important, right? Because that if you don't if you don't tell them, they don't know, right? And but yeah, I mean, we've done a lot of work, and just with everybody else, adding our voices in there to try to make a difference, in child abuse prevention. And it's just it's so amazing to me how many, like through the years, um, how many reports of like child sexual predators have have come through. There's just so many. Like they're everywhere. They're on the internet. They're in your town. They're on your street. They're all over the place. Like there's so many, and you cannot afford to make a mistake and not know who your child is around, and have your child to be either kidnapped or sexually assaulted or whatever. It's just horrible, right? So it's a good idea to get the info and just be aware that this stuff does happen. It's not like it's uncommon, right? That's the sad part. It would be good if it was uncommon, but it's actually quite common. Online enticement, that's what I was just talking about. And I mean, this is a huge issue, right? Because everything's online nowadays. And children, if the parents don't know to put on, those proper, blockers or whatever they're called, to keep their children safe. I mean, there's all sorts of ways that those people can get access to your child. They pose as other children. They pose as that child's peer in that age group, and they'll even if they're a 30, 40-year-old man, they'll say that they're a 12-year-old girl, right? And then they get them to meet them someplace, and they're kidnapped, sexually assaulted, and they're lucky if they live. A lot of times these children are just killed, right? So it's just absolutely horrific. And endangered runaways. It's a child under 18 years old who has run away from a parent, guardian, or state care facility. And I think this is so important because there's a lot of endangered runaways on the streets in, everywhere around the world. I mean, we're not even just talking like North America. I mean, worldwide, there are so many runaways they're already endangered, but they're even more endangered because now they're on the streets, and it just puts them at that much more risk. They may be running from abuse, like I was saying when I first, was talking here in the show. They might be running from abuse and then end up in another abusive situation and killed. That's why I didn't run away, because I knew that that was a possibility. I was like, well, I could, just stay and put up with what I'm having to put up with here in my house, or I could just, you know, possibly be killed on the streets. So I thought, of course it's better to stick it out. And plus, I mean, I loved my parents. I wanted them to do the right thing, by each other and by us. But sometimes the abuse for children is just so bad, they have to get out or they'll die. Like the parents, are threatening their lives. Like my mom used to threaten my life, but it was more of, she was threatening my life, but I really didn't believe that she would kill me. There was a couple times I thought she might, but um, it was like she just liked to say it. My mom was just vicious. But the thing is there are children out there who have guns pointed at them, and you know they're they're shot at. They have to get out of the house or they'll be killed. Right, just right at that moment. They don't have a choice. They stand there and be shot and killed or leave. Right. So there's a lot of those children that end up on the street like that, and a parent's threatening to kill them or whatever. They or caregiver, whoever it is, and they have to go out on the street. They don't even have the time to get the police involved, right? It's kind of like if somebody's coming after you with a gun. It's like you got to go, right? So it's unfortunate, but there's a lot of these kids on the streets that have come from that stuff, and they're running away. It's not just always that the child just doesn't want to follow the rules in the home. It's a lot of that abuse is just so horrific. They have to get out, and they end up on the street, and they end up in all sorts of trouble, and that's just breaks my heart. Absolutely, it does. I see a lot of kids on the street here where I live, youth and not so much young children. We're talking; these would be older teens, and there's child traffic, sex trafficking in my city. Guaranteed there is. There's all sorts of horrible things going on here. There's no city that could say that they don't have that stuff going on. There's no town that could say that that doesn't occur in their town, because it is. It's happening. It's happening everywhere. And it's like these kids have no protection. Who's going to protect them? Sometimes it's even the police involved in this stuff, which is really sad to say because there's some really great police officers out there, I'm sure, who you know who are real police officers. They care about people, and they're not out to hurt people. But there are police officers that do these horrible things also. It's just a fact. Every now and they catch them. Um, but it's just permeated our society. This sort of stuff. And like it's always been a problem. It was a problem back with the Romans. It was a problem with so many cultures way back thousands of years ago. But it's still a problem today, and we still haven't figured it out, right? It's kind of like, no, it's not okay. Abuse is not okay. And like I was talking on the show the other night, we've we haven't made much progress, but we've only been working at it for a couple hundred years. Like seriously, when are we going to wake up and smell the coffee? You know, as a society, as a people, that these things are not okay to do to children. You know, um, it's not okay to abuse a child. So whether it's a parent or caregiver of some type, or whether it's stranger, abduction, kidnapping, assaulting, you know, whoever these people are, it's just incredibly wrong that these people are doing these things to children. And it's not always a parent. It's just a lot of times it's a coach, or it could be a teacher, it could be anybody, a doctor. Doctors do. There are some terrible doctors out there too who are you know sexual predators, right? Abusing adults and children. It's just like, who are these people? Where'd they come from? You know what I mean? Like, how could you be so sick? But they are. And it's like, you know, if you have children, you need to protect your children from this stuff. It's everywhere, and you just need to know, right? People think they're safe, and that's false. There's no security on this planet, and there's your children are not safe, not one bit, and you need to do all you can to protect them, right? So you got to know who your teachers, your children's teachers are. You got to know who your children's coaches are. You got to know who these people are. Do some background checks on people. Get some info on people that have access with your children. Because a lot of times they just move these people around. It's like, oh well, just like Donna, like we had talked about in that show for AU4H, Advocates United for Humanity, AU4H Radio, and we were talking about that coach who just got moved into your community. It's like, oh great, now we got that going on in our community. You know what I mean? It's just like the priests, with the Catholic Church. They move them around too, child sexual predators, and they just hush it up and they move them to another part of the country where nobody knows about this stuff, right? So they just abuse more children, right? So what's wrong with society that we're allowing this to go on? Do we not care enough about children? Are children not important to us? Are they are they just something that's just not important? Children are our future. Children are the future of this world. They're the next generations. think about how messed up the next few generations are going to be because there's so many children out there who are just so abused. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that was Jerry Sandusky. And, so terrible, right? And this stuff happens, right? And we need to, that just like that petition you got going on change.org, Donna, about the where you it's a to allow the perpetrators information to be the access to that information. I'm gonna actually we're gonna if we don't get to do a show, doesn't matter if we get to do a show or not. I'd like to be able to do that with you, Donna, with Lee, if we can, using StreamYard, and do a show about your petition. And but if we don't have time, because I know everybody's schedules are different, everybody's got different things going on. Then I'll just do one myself. I'll just do one myself as part of this 30 days because it's really important for people to realize that there's some good work being done, and there are some people in high places who are working to stop and prevent child abuse. And the more voices in on it, and the more signatures on a petition, the better, because they can go and get those laws changed, right? So very, very important for people to realize. So I did post that link in my community section, the discussion section, and it's under community on YouTube here. And then there's a link there to that petition, and you can read about it, see what's going on with it, and it's just so important to get involved, right? And oh, you're welcome, Donna, anytime. I'm so glad you're here. That's very nice of you to come and hang out with me. And yeah, I mean, people are gonna have to listen to me for 30 days, so I don't know, you know. But I'm determined to do this because, like I said, we don't know how long we have on this earth. We don't, nobody knows. And this might be my last opportunity. I thought I really want to go out making some noise, and hopefully people will share these videos and just share child abuse prevention information. Don't be ashamed of it. I'm a child abuse survivor, and I mean, years ago before my healing journey, I really didn't like talking about it. I didn't really like telling people I was abused because of the shame involved in it. But now there's no shame in it. The shame belongs to the abusers. It's the shame is on the abusers, not the victim of the abuse. That shame is not mine. And so, um, you know, I don't mind talking about this stuff, right? Where a lot of people are very uncomfortable about it. But what's more uncomfortable is the fact that children are being abused because nobody wants to talk about this stuff, right? Let's talk about it, and it's very important that we do because the reason why the cultures actually years ago, so many cultures passed, were not nothing was done, was because nobody was allowed to talk about it. Um, it was all hush hush. Keep it shoved under the carpet. Like they said, behind closed doors. What goes on in this house is our business. My mom threatened my life one time. She said, if you ever tell anybody, another living soul, what goes on in this home, I'll kill you. You know, and I was like, because there was an intervention done on my behalf, and you know, my life was threatened. That's what happens to a lot of children. Their life is threatened because you know they they maybe told a friend or something some things that are going on in the home, and or the teacher or something. You know what I mean? Many times children's lives are threatened or they're killed because they tell somebody about the abuse. A lot of times in domestic violence that's the case. So women, or even men, let's just be honest. um, men are victims too, and sometimes they just can't get out with there's no way to get help because if they even make a move to try to get out, the abuser will kill them. And so what do? You have to have a safety plan, right? But children don't have a safety plan. They don't know how to get a safety plan. And especially young children, babies and little children, there's no way they can figure that out. So who are they going to tell, right? But it's just so sad. It's just that whole culture. I mean, we don't talk about this. What goes on in this home stays in this home. Or if it's a teacher, what goes on in this situation stays with, what I mean, threatening the child. Um, and I think that that's that whole silence, surrounding abuse allows it to continue. It allows it to keep going. That's why we need everybody's voice in on this. If everybody was shouting out, of course, the abusers aren't going to shout out because they love to abuse children. But the rest of us don't have to do that. We can all be making a lot of noise here. You know what I mean? It's so important. Yeah, it's just so typical, Donna, that people, well, because there was an intervention done, and these friends, my friends' parents came and talked to my mom, because she had beaten me up really badly, and they were like, we want to intervene, we want to get involved here, but your daughter won't let us. But we just want you to know, we see any more beating, like we see any more like bruises on her and welts, and bloody, you know, lips and black eyes. We're gonna call the police, And my mom didn't like that. She's like, well, go ahead. I don't want her around here anyway, you know. And that's the situation. So then I got told my life was threatened because they had found out. I really didn't tell them. I just went to their house because I thought I was going to die. After that beating, I really thought that my life was over. I was about ready to pass out and in the middle of the street, sort of thing. So, it's just sad what children have to go through, right? And it's no child should ever have to have their life threatened. I mean, who could do that to a child? Threaten their lives, but people do it all the time, and then they kill them. It's not really a threat. I mean, they just they just follow through and kill that child or kill those children, right? So it does happen. So yeah, it's so important keep that we keep talking and trying to figure out how to change this mess, right? So that's what we're going to do. Gonna keep going. So let's see if there's any more. I mean, there's so many more issues of this. Like, for instance, the following factors that may put youth at an increased risk of running away or becoming homeless is physical or sexual abuse. That's it, people. Family conflict, lack of acceptance of gender identity or sexual orientation, struggling to manage mental health, substance abuse, um, medical issue, developmental or physical disability, pregnancy, online enticement. They might wonder way to be with a friend, a romantic partner, or a biological family, gang activity, child sex trafficking, and social rejection or bullying. This is all factors that may put youth at an increased risk of running away or becoming homeless. And this is the issue with endangered runaways. There are a lot of endangered runaways on the streets. And I look at these people differently probably than a lot of people do, because I'm looking at them through the eyes of somebody who has knowledge of abuse. So when I see youth on the streets, I don't just look at them like, oh, look at those little punks. I mean, sometimes they're doing stuff that they shouldn't be doing, and you're just like, you know, might say, okay, they are little punks. But the thing is they're not. They're human beings, and something has gone wrong, because the reason they're hanging with the gang is because that's where they're finding their acceptance. That's where they're finding that safety. And so, of course they're going to want to hang out there, right? There's a lot of kids that are in those gangs just probably that come from good homes, and they get involved in that because they like the lifestyle, right? But and that's just a fact. But not all of them, right? There's I mean, who knows what the percentage really is? I'm sure there's information out there about that, but it's not all the fact that they're all members of gangs have been abused. It's just the issue that there are some. Um, you know, I mean, kids will hang with their own peers. Friends, like all the friends that I made were friends who, like the people that I hung out with were people who were coming from broken homes, who were not treated great as children, abuse, dysfunction in the family, family violence, domestic violence. And these kids all grew up like that, like the same as me, so we could relate with each other. And there was a whole lot of substance abuse in all of our homes. So we all just picked right up. We were like, okay, well, there's people doing drugs in our homes, so we'll just do drugs. You know what I mean? And that's what we did. And we hung out. We kind of copycatted our drug abusive families, and but we were all abuse survivors, and we were kind of just relying on each other to be a family because we didn't have a good family to rely on. So this is what children and youth will do. They find the people that they identify with, right? That make them feel safe, and they can be themselves, and you know, they can feel safe in that environment, right? To be themselves. And it's yeah. I mean, I knew a lot of people who grew up abused a lot, and like I said in my books, I wasn't the only one. I mean, we were all messed up, all coming from broken homes and horrible situations. So, and there was a lot of us. So that just tells you in one little neighborhood area of a small little city in the United States, so many children had been abused, and it's horrific, right? So that's why we have to. Yeah, I mean, I'm thankful for my friends. One of my friends is my best friend down in the States, from years and years ago. I mean, she was my buddy, and she's on the front cover of Levita Juvies. She's wearing the red shirt, and she was, um, she was abused. She grew up in a domestic violence situation too with her parents, and alcoholism, stuff like that. So she had a hard life, and she saw the book, and I asked her, I said, I hope it's okay that I put your picture on there. I didn't know where she was for a long time. So finally got in touch with her. And she said, no, I think that's awesome, man. Because we were the Levita Juvies, me and her. And there was a few others that were involved. But, but we're the ones that we actually coined the term because we liked it. And just being crazy, crazy young people. But, you know, I mean, we both had our share of troubles, and she's like today she's doing fine. I'm happy for her. Some of my friends didn't make it. Some of our friends didn't make it, and so it's just so sad. I see these youth out here on the streets, and I'm like, what's put them there? You know, like it's not all that they just didn't want to follow the rules at home. It's got to be abuse, got to be something going on. You know, because I see the way people look. I've seen and looked at the way people treat their children, and with disdain, you know, making them feel that they didn't really want them. They're just a nuisance. They're a bother. You're always causing me so much trouble. This kind of stuff, making these children feel like they're just useless and worthless and not worth anything to the parents. There's a way to there's a proper way to parent, and then there's abuse. You know what I mean? So it's just so important that we get the information, learn the facts, learn what the signs and symptoms are, which we will be covering that too, and educate ourselves about what to look for, so we can do the right thing and make a phone call and get that child some help if we realize that a child's being abused in any way. It doesn't have to be just child physical abuse or child sexual abuse. I mean, there's emotional abuse, psychological abuse. You have to be cataloging everything you see, for you know a witness of what behavior you've seen, because that type of abuse is hard to prove in court. But a lot of children are just traumatized psychologically by their parents or caregivers, and what that's actually worse than physical abuse. you know you can kind of, if you live through the physical abuse, you can just deal with it. But the psychological trauma and the emotional trauma from you know that type of abuse messes you up internally. It messes who you are up. It messes your psyche up. So then those people, like for instance me, have a hard time in life dealing with things, right? And don't make good choices a lot of times for ourselves, and don't trust anybody. And it just sets us up for a whole lot of trouble. So it's so important to learn the signs and symptoms, absolutely, and we'll cover that on another show. Thank you so much for being with me, Donna. I'm glad that you could be here, and anybody else who's tuned in. And like I said, I'm just tired because I just finished working my week's worth of work, and so now this is my Friday, so I'm like really tired now. I'm like, oh, I'm glad it's my Friday, and I'll be back on tomorrow night, and we're looking at child physical abuse tomorrow night, and same time, 8 o'clock p.m. Mountain Standard Time, and I hope you'll join me. And I'll put the link in there. I haven't set the show up yet, but I will. And I wish you a great night, everybody. Thanks for being here with me, Donna. I have to go like this. I love you, dear. And God bless you all. God keep you until the next time. Bye for now.